Okay, everybody, so welcome today to our virtual boardroom that is being facilitated by HR Recruit and Kate Maddison-Greenwell. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Kate, who will introduce herself shortly. Kate's going to take you through how teams can be self-managing and the significant benefits it can bring to HR and/or a leadership team. If you've got any burning questions during the session, then please put them into the chat box facility. But as there's a lot of content to go through, we have allowed some time at the end for Q&A. I'm now going to hand you over to Kate, who will introduce herself and start the session. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much, Jo. I'm Kate. It's a pleasure to be here and it's a pleasure to see you all here. Thank you so much. And thank you to those that have left their cameras on. It's always really reassuring to see faces that can give me thumbs up, can give me smiles and what have you. So thank you very much. I'm here today to talk about bringing Scrum to the HR boardroom. So hopefully you've all got your rugby balls. Is that right? Has everybody got their rugby balls? No? Okay. You'll be relieved to know that we won't be playing any rugby today. So instead, we're going to be talking about Agile, the Agile mindset and methodology, and one of the frameworks within Agile, which is Scrum. So we haven't got long today. We've got sort of 45, 50 minutes. We're going to leave some space for questions at the end. So I'm going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour. If you have got any questions, then do feel free to pop them in the chat. If I can weave it into the presentation today, if I can weave the answers in, then I will. If not, then I'll try and answer some at the end. So we're going to be doing things a little bit differently today. I'm going to be using Miro to present. And at a point during the presentation, there's going to be an opportunity for you to get a bit interactive. So some of you may have used virtual whiteboards and things like that before, and Miro is an interactive virtual whiteboard. But we're going to be asking you to contribute some of your common challenges, and we'll see whether we can weave that through the presentation as we go through. So hopefully I've covered everything. So let's make a start. So hopefully you can all see my screen as I go to the next one. Can I get a thumbs up from people that are on camera? Fantastic. Always a bit nerve-wracking, that first one. So you may be wondering who I am. So I'm Kate Maddison-Greenwell, and I'm the founder of People Efficient, where we reimagine how HR gets done. We're an Agile HR consultancy, and we specialise in change and transformation, in particular digital transformation. We do lots of different projects like acquisitions, leadership teams, and we also specialise in rapidly growing businesses. We provide interims, Agile in HR courses, and also leadership courses. And one of my particular specialisms is that I bring calm to chaos. So not always, and not, sometimes it can be a little bit chaotic, but that's my mantra. I try and bring calm to chaos. So why are we here? So you've probably known, if you've been in HR for quite a while, that we're living in a VUCA world. So that's a volatile, uncertain, chaotic and ambiguous world where requirements are changing constantly. So we're seeing skill shortages. We're still feeling the effects of Brexit and COVID. There's inflation, there's cost of living crisis, or crises, should I say. And this is driving employee behaviour to change. So whereas once they might have tolerated, poor employee experience or poor employee engagement, they're not really tolerating that so much now. They're also valuing themselves a lot higher too. So employees are viewing where they work as an extension of their life rather than it being, the sole purpose with everything slotted in. So companies are also facing challenges. So whereas once they may have raised wages to entice competitive talent, they are having to make their working environment more attractive to retain, which is sometimes harder than raising wages. So businesses can't rely on siloed entities of their business to tackle issues anymore if they want to remain competitive. So as HR leaders, we need to be looking at working environments that are in line with where HR needs to transform. So strategies need to be around how to engage employees to bring their best to work and how this can be facilitated rather than continuing with current transactional processes that can't facilitate change or improvement quickly and as flexibly as companies need. So what is Agile and what is an Agile approach? So Agile, I always like to think of it with a capital A, is a mindset. So it's about establishing a shared vision and moving towards those goals in an iterative manner to the advantage of the company and the employees. So it's about valuing teams over individuals and about hiring and retaining people with the specialist skills to do what needs to be done to move forwards, instead of perhaps job descriptions with a long list of duties that don't always add value to the end goal. It's about working together across functions instead of being siloed and making decisions separately that hold progress back. It's also about empowering employees to fail fast while minimizing risk to truly find solutions that improve the employee's experience, which will in turn improve things like customer experience and drive that competitive advantage regardless of industry. So the kind of terms that are used when talking about Agile are things like people-centric or human-centric or employee-centric, frequent iterations, responding to changes without derailing plans, trusted teams. You may have heard of some of the frameworks like Scrum or Kanban or SAFe. And it's also about cross-functional team working. So it's about the way of working, bringing the culture and engagement rather than separate resources or separate, benefits or what have you to try and keep people engaged. So I feel that this can start with HR leading the way. So there's 12 principles of Agile, and you'll probably be relieved to know that we're not going to go through all of them today. The ones I focus on quite a lot are how to create a self-organising team of motivated individuals that work together and succeed together. So are there any others out there? Are there any others that have caught your eye? Pop them in the chats and I can quickly tell you what they mean. But the ones that chime with me are teams working together daily throughout the project. One of my favourites is simplicity, the art of maximising the amount of work not done, not because I'm lazy, but because I want things to be simple. The best people-centred solutions and designs emerge from self-organising teams. So rather than teams being told what needs to happen, they are part of the solution and they pull tasks and responsibilities towards themselves, which then drives accountability, which is key within Agile. Another one that I really like is at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and then tunes and adjusts its behaviour accordingly. So psychological safety is a big part of Agile. Everything is transparent and everything is kind of run by the teams themselves. So we've got a couple of bits. Love the bottom right-hand side. I've just said that. Caroline was so in tune. Deliver improvements frequently. Absolutely. So welcome changes even late on to harness change for the employee's advantage. So if you find when you're trying to make an improvement that there is something else that can be brought in that will really make a difference, then absorb it into your project because you've got an employee-centric mindset. So those are the 12 principles of Agile. So what is an Agile team or a Scrum team? So Scrum can be applied to HR teams and leadership to improve collaboration, communication and efficiency, along with examples of how other organisations have successfully implemented Scrum in their HR departments. So Scrum is a framework that was originally designed for software development, but it can be applied to a wide range of projects and industries. So in recent years, more and more organisations have been starting to apply Agile and Scrum to HR teams and leadership to improve that collaboration, communication and efficiency. So in HR, there's lots of processes that can benefit from a Scrum framework, such as recruiting, performance development, and employee engagement. So by using Scrum, which we're going to talk about in a moment, HR teams can improve their ability to deliver high quality services and support to the rest of the organisation. So, for example, one organisation that we successfully implemented Scrum into was quite a large healthcare provider. So we use Scrum to streamline their recruiting processes, which have previously been quite slow and cumbersome. Hopefully, we've all been there, I'm sure. I know in other businesses that I've worked in, it's, a real headache. But by creating a product backlog, which we're going to be talking about, of all of the open positions, then prioritising them based on business needs, we were able to make better use of their resources and improve their time to hire. We also implemented daily stand-ups to increase communication and identify any obstacles, and sprint reviews to gather feedback from stakeholders and continuously improve the process. Another organisation that we applied Scrum to in an Agile mindset was a technology company that was really struggling with employee engagement. So again, we created a product backlog of engagement initiatives, such as training programs, team building, reward and recognition. And by prioritising those initiatives based on employee feedback rather than what we thought they needed, so by basing it on their feedback and business value, we were able to improve engagement and retention and create a more positive work culture. So we're going to be talking about some of those things as we go through. So the Scrum framework itself consists of 3 roles. Now I'm going to stick with the original terms, but sometimes we call them different things in different companies. So there's the product owner, the Scrum master, and the delivery team. So the product owner is responsible for defining the goals and priorities of the project, and for managing the product backlog, which is a list of services or features or requirements that need to be completed based on feedback or what the business needs. Then you have the Scrum Master that's responsible for making sure that the Scrum process happens and the team adheres to it. And then you have the delivery team, which is usually cross-functional, and they're responsible for actually completing the work and delivering the products from the backlog. So product owner, Scrum Master, sometimes we call them stakeholder ambassador, sometimes we call them project leader, depending on what the culture is for the business. We call them different things. The one thing about Agile is that it's kind of agile, so you can adapt it to what is important to your business and with your culture. So the Scrum framework is based on a series of iterations called sprints. So each sprint is typically 2 to 4 weeks long and consists of a set of activities, including planning, daily Scrum or daily stand-up, sprint review, and a retrospective. So during sprint planning, the team works with the product owner to define a sprint goal and select a set of product backlog items that they will complete during the sprint. And we're going to do a little activity on this in a moment. The team then works on these items. They pull the tasks to themselves during the sprint, and they hold a daily stand-up meeting every day to discuss the progress and plan the day ahead, and importantly, identify any obstacles. So because they're pulling tasks, they are self-organising and they are accountable for what they've committed to do. So at the end of the sprint, the team then holds a sprint review to present the increment or the new service or the change that's been made to the product owner and to any other stakeholders. And they then receive feedback. So the team can then hold a sprint retrospective to reflect on how they've worked, behaviours, and what can be done to improve how they're working together. So it's really accountable, it's really transparent, and there's lots of opportunities for people to reflect and make that iterative change to work better as a team. So it's really important that if you're asking teams to be self-organising, you also have to have a framework of some kind to bring some kind of order to that collaboration. Sometimes people can get confused with self-organising, meaning that there's just, everybody just gets on with what they think is important. But if by bringing in a framework, it means that you're having a much more cohesive and collaborative team, which then enables them to be self-organising and accountable. So the key artifacts in the Scrum framework is the product backlog, which, if you can imagine, is a backlog of things that need to change based on things like engagement surveys or stay interviews or exit interviews or anecdotal or board driven initiatives or the mission. It's lots of different things would be in that product backlog. And that will be in priority order. And sometimes that priority changes, but it will be in priority order. And then you have the sprint backlog, which is what you've taken from that backlog and you are committing to do during that sprint time. The product backlog is constantly evolving, as you can probably imagine, depending on what's happening within the business. But the sprint doesn't change. So if you've pulled things from the product backlog, you will continue with that until the next sprint, and then you will pull things that are of a higher priority down. And this is how you're bringing that kind of ordered sense. So it's great for collaboration, flexibility, and continuous improvement. So here's where we're going to get a little bit experimental. So who's going to join me in having a bit of a play on this Miro board? Is there any appetite for this? So if there is appetite, I'm just about to put a link in the chat. And if you feel, Caroline, you are my absolute star, you're straight in there. If you're feeling brave, I promise you won't break anything. If you do, it's just a minimum charge. It's absolutely fine, just a daily rate. It's not a problem. That hasn't put Jill off. Excellent. So if you don't want to join in, that's also absolutely fine. You can just keep watching and see what happens as you go. Jill's got loads of money. She's fine. She'll take that risk. So what I am asking people to do now is I'm going to stop presenting, but it should still stay on there. And I'm going to ask, so what you might see is you might see some people, some cursors flying around with some really interesting names like visiting sculptor and visiting builder. Everybody's going around seeing what they can break and what they can see is coming up on the rest of the presentation. Try and be disciplined and stay with me. So I'm going to bring everybody to me now. So what you should see is a frame called Common Challenges, and I will be able to see if you go off piste. You won't be able to move anything else, but you will be able to write on those sticky notes. So I would like you to tell me the kind of things that are in your backlog or things that you're concerned about or challenges that you are facing at the moment. And they could be minimal, they could be little ones, or they could be bigger ones. That's absolutely fine. And if people don't want to join on this board, then pop into the chat and I will be your ambassador and I will do my best to type up what you're putting into the chat. So I can see people having some fun, moving things around. It was so beautiful. It was all so square. So let's have a look. Let's try and make this a little bit closer so that we can see. If you keep the sticky notes on within this frame, that would be really, really useful. So we've got values. It looks like we've got next year's strategy on there. Wellbeing first culture, pay review. So don't forget, you can pop on the chats and I can put some things on there.
It's really hard to read what people have written. Kate.
It's fine. I'm going to tidy that up. Yeah, I'm going to tidy it up. So if I can ask people, just stick with the sticky notes rather than moving them or making them bigger. And then it'll be a lot easier for people to be able to see. So I'll start moving some of these. So trust is a challenge. That's interesting. Somebody's writing some kind of novel, I think. So next year's strategy, wellbeing first, documenting processes. Yeah, embedding values. Great. Accountability. Are there any others? So implement higher living wage in good time to alleviate some dire circumstances our employees are in. Okay. Business goals and objectives. Is it easier to see now, Joe? Can you see some of these? Accountability, driving improvements.
Yeah, that's much better.
Business goals and objectives. Poshing, not sure about that one. Funding challenges. Okay, so I think that means, so funding challenges. Leadership charter, I think that one's trying to say. Okay, brilliant. Workload, annual HR cycle planning. Okay. So it looks like, there's quite a varied, some challenges. I'm sure that's not all of the challenges that you're all facing. But there seems to be a couple that are coming out. So goals and objectives and strategy seem to be the ones that are coming out quite a bit. So I think we'll probably stick with that one, I think. So planning. Okay, that's great. Okay, so hopefully you've had some fun on that one. So let's go back to presenting. So you're welcome to either stay on that Miro board and follow me through, or you can come out and go back to where we are sharing. So what you might see from this is that you can probably take some of those challenges and you would probably be able to put them into what we call epics. So I haven't put all of the epics on there because it very much depends on your business and on your culture and what have you, but some common ones are things like reward and recognition, comp and bends, processes and systems, talent attraction and onboarding. So it's quite good to think about things when you're thinking about products, which are the things that you want to change, and thinking of them in what we call epics, so categorizing them somewhat. What can often happen if you think about epics is that businesses tackle one epic at a time. They might have a theme for the year, or they might have, one particular challenge that they're going to face for that year. So, for example, they might decide on things like processes or something like that they want to implement a HR information system, let's say, for example, and that will be the primary focus for the HR team. And that's fine until you realise that when you focus on one epic at a time, other issues are storing up. And these are issues that are usually employee facing. So think of it a bit like a waterfall. You start a plan and then you're absolutely going down that waterfall without making any changes because this is the plan and this is what the business has decided is going to be the focus area. For Agile, it's an incremental change. So we ask ourselves, what will have the biggest impact on employees the quickest? How can we work together to solve this? What's the reason that we're considering a HR information system? Is it to do with documenting processes? Is it to do with, admin? And it might be that HR information system is absolutely the right thing. But while the HR team is focused on that, they're not making very clear and transparent changes and improvements to employees. So you can probably imagine what employees may think of HR teams if they're not seeing what's going on. So we're going to touch on that topic a little bit later as well. So this is a sprint framework example. So I'm hoping that you're kind of visualizing and seeing it all coming together. So you'll have OKRs, which are objectives and key results. You might call it something different in each business that you're in. So it'll be the mission or whatever it is that the business, where the business needs to be. And from those objectives, you might have some key results. So I've put some examples on there. Decrease employee attrition by 20% by the end of the year. EBITDA to 20 million by the end of the year. Be the #1 supplier in field by customer satisfaction by the end of Q3. So I've just made those up. And from those OKRs, you'll see that there's some epics that touch on being able to provide those key results. So retention and talent attraction is going to make a difference to decreasing the employee attrition by the end of the year, for example. Being number one supplier in field, we need to build performance. We know that we need to train, and we need to upskill our employees. So some of the things that might be in the product backlog might be things like reviewing the onboarding, or reviewing job adverts, or reviewing the current performance development framework. If you have a new development framework or a new idea for it, testing it. So those will be your backlogs. There's lots and lots of things that will need to happen in order to achieve the key results. And they should be in priority order. And then from there, the team can then pull those tasks into that sprint period. So they may agree that they can achieve a survey of new starters in the last 6 months. They may agree that they can test the problem. Is the advert and interview reflective of the experience? They might want to test that and see whether that's the case. They may agree to do a focus group of new ideas for new starters or line managers or a board member, for example. So hopefully you can kind of see how it's coming through. So you've got the business mission, you've got different epics that it will affect, you've got a product backlog of things that need to happen, and then you're pulling things into the sprint that you are going to focus on solely. And then you go into the sprint, which is on there. So you do your planning, you work out what your sprint goal is, and your sprint goal might be something like understanding the core, the three core reasons for employee attrition. That might be your sprint goal. Then you go into the sprint and you have your daily stand-ups to see how each person is progressing. At the end of the sprint, you will have your sprint review, where you will be able to show off the changes that you've made. And sometimes they're small changes and sometimes they're larger. Then you have your sprint retro, where you look at behaviours and how you've worked as a team. And then you update the backlog. Priorities for the business may have changed, so you might need to reprioritize, and then you begin again. And that's the cycle of Scrum. So you may remember I was talking about simplicity and maximizing the amount of work not done. Now, this was something that was really hard for me when I first started, because I'm the type of person that wants to do everything, be across everything, and make everything better for everybody all the time. But that way kind of burnout lies. And I think that's something that probably people within HR can really relate to, because we just want to make things better for people all the time. So learning the art of simplicity and maximizing the work not done was like a revelation to me. And I can give you an example. So if you think back to that implementing HR information system, the HRIS, so during the 6 to 12 months it takes to implement, and if that's the sole focus for the business, nobody else can use that HR information system until it's been brought in. And during the time that you're implementing it, nothing's changing for the employees. So the frustrations that they have that's causing you to want to implement something is still there. And that's quite a lot of attrition that might happen out of frustrations because of that. So I like to look at something called a minimum viable product. And this is the way that Agile works with iterative change. So I think of it as, without Agile, this is often the way that people approach things. So think of it a bit like we need to get from A to B. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to build a car. So what we do is we start off with a wheel, then we have 2 wheels, but nobody can use it. Then we have the body of a car, but nobody can use it because it hasn't been put together yet. And then we have the car, big thumbs up. It can be driven, and we can all pat ourselves on the back because we've been able to implement this new car. With Agile, we look at it differently. So we look at it a bit like this. So we start off, we need to get from A to B. So we start off with a skateboard. Now, a skateboard, perhaps not everybody can use a skateboard, but it's something that will get us from A to B. might be a bit slow. I don't know whether any of you have skateboarded recently. I haven't, but the last time I did it, I wasn't very good, but I could get from A to B. But with an improvement and iterative change, we can make that skateboard into a scooter. So again, perhaps not everybody can use it, but more people can use a scooter than can use a skateboard. We can then make another change and it becomes a bike. And then we make another change, it becomes a motorbike, still a bit rubbish if it rains, but then by the end of it, we've made our car. So I guess the kind of moral of the story is that you're not helping everybody all the time, but you are making sure that more people can use the service or the product that you are providing whilst you are working towards that end goal. So let me give you a real life story here. So this is a true story. So we had an issue with employee attrition at a particular business. There were lots of reasons why people were leaving, but the thing that kept coming up was that they were really frustrated. They felt like they weren't being listened to. They felt that processes weren't good enough. They felt that they were constantly waiting for things, for decisions to be made. And one of the things that kept coming up all the time was out of all of these, sorry, I'm just glancing over to the left. So there were things like onboarding wasn't great. There were delays to recruitment, the time to hire, annual leave frustrations. One of the things that kept coming up was the processes. And in particular, the time taken to receive expenses payments. It just kept coming up. And people were really frustrated. Sometimes it took 6 to 8 weeks for expenses to be paid. And on the whole, the expenses weren't very high, but it was really not helping people with, cost of living, all of those kinds of things. And the company were a little bit dismissive of it because they were just like, well, it is what it is. We've got a process. We can't have people claiming expenses without, following the approval process. So they weren't being listened to either. So those are the kind of main issues. So as a team, we brought together somebody from finance, somebody from HR, a sales rep who was somebody that constantly puts in expenses, and somebody else as well. I can't remember. I think it was somebody that was a new starter. And we talked about what the issues were. So we did our user research. We went out and we said to people, okay, why are people complaining about this? What's the problem? How often does it happen? And what are the bottlenecks? So we started off talking about things like, right, what we need to do is we need to, we need to have a new expenses system. That's what we need. The problem is that people are having to manually submit their expenses and they're fed up and they're frustrated. That's kind of where we started. But when we looked at the focus groups and when we started actually testing some ideas, we realized that the bottleneck was to do with the 3-tiered approval process. So the company was really worried about risk. So then we looked at, okay, so how often are expenses submitted that are over £1,000? This is quite a big company. And that accounted for less than 4% of all expenses claims. So we then explored what the risk would be of reducing anything under £1,000 to just having one approver, just the line manager. So we explored the risks and we decided that we would set that up in a pilot group with the sales reps. And because we did that, we were able to reduce that time to 1 week because it was just one approver, went straight to payroll. We did another couple of bits as well with the digital process, but we were able to do it. We didn't have to implement an expensive new expenses platform. We were able to understand what the problem was really quickly because we brought people together. And if you think about it, if we had implemented that new expensive expenses platform, it actually wouldn't have solved the problem because we still would have had that approval issue. It would have got to people's emails maybe quicker, but people would have still sat on them. So it meant that we were able to achieve that sprint goal because we reduced the time to 1 week. Our goal was 2 weeks, but we couldn't have done that if we hadn't worked on that cross-functionally. So that's what we did. Now, a little bit later on, I think they did implement for over £2,000. They did implement 2 approvals. There needing to be 2 approvals, but that wasn't because anything had happened. It was just the appetite to risk that priority changed. But in terms of for 99.9% of the employees, that it was sorted. It was fine. So hopefully that kind of explains. So we have the backlog. With different issues. The epic is employee experience. We want to improve employee experience. There are different ways that we can do that. We can look at onboarding, authorization to recruit, a particular process that's frustrating people, the expenses, annual leave frustration, time to hire. And we picked one that we felt was the priority and would make a really big impact as quickly as we could. And because we then did that as our first project, that helped people to really have confidence in us as an Agile team. So if we were to do that here, and I am a little bit conscious of time, if we were to do that here, if we were to take one of those challenges, let's say was it values or onboarding or workload, if we take one of those, perhaps if we take workload, for example, we can have a sprint goal, which might be something like reduce the time taken. So reduce the time taken on. Can somebody give me an example of something that's admin-y? Maybe, I don't know, holiday approvals or something like that.
Onboarding.
Reduce the time taken to onboard. Is that what we're saying? Yeah, reduce the time taken to onboard from, let's say, I don't know, 12 weeks to 8. So if that's our sprint goal, so first of all, the epic maybe talent, maybe probably covers a few things, but let's say talent attraction. So what kind of things are we thinking about that would make a difference to keep the quality of the onboarding high, but the time that we are spending on it low? So feel free to jump in on the chat. I'm just spitballing here. So it might be something like digitize contracts, maybe. So things like e-signatures, maybe. What other kind of things? Can anybody come up with some?
E-learning.
Yeah. So it could be introducing e-learning. It could be even something as simple as maybe HR are quite drained because the line managers keep coming up to them and asking them what they need to do next. So you're constantly having to have those kind of communications. So if we look at that, so our sprint goal is reduce the time taken to onboard from 12 weeks to 8. So we might want to take 1 or 2 of those things and pull them into our sprint. We might not be able to do all of them because we're only going to sprint for a week or for 2 weeks, but we will pull in communications and e-signatures. So it might be that we decide as a cross-functional team that we are going to do some user research into Adobe. Other ones are available. I can't remember them all now. And we might want to look at a SharePoint you're testing my typing skills now, a SharePoint page on onboarding that has frequently asked questions, maybe. So might want to look at building that, for example. So we're looking at something, I mean, obviously, if you don't have SharePoint, whatever your Google equivalent or what have you is, or if you haven't got one, that might be somewhere that you might want to start. So maybe gathering, so what you might do during this sprint is gather those frequently asked questions. What is it that people are constantly ringing HR for and asking for, or what have you, and gathering all of that together in a place where everybody can see that. And with e-signatures, by starting with something like Adobe, you can then look at digitizing contracts. And this is something that I've just done for a hotel group recently. We've just looked at all of their processes that go with onboarding, and we've automated a lot of them. So we've automated, and this is without having an ATS. So we've been able to do it all through Microsoft 365 and Adobe, and we've used something called Power Automate, so that whenever a new starter is set up, the hiring manager does a very brief form, and it then notifies IT of what equipment they need. It puts calendar dates in the hiring manager's calendar for things like probation meeting, coffee chats, all of those kinds of things. And at the bottom of each one of those calendar invites, it gives a link to the SharePoint if they have any frequently asked questions. So they can keep, so it's kind of getting people to serve themselves. So that was the challenge that we had, because they didn't want to invest in an ATS. So that was how we did it. So hopefully that's kind of a bit of a whistle stop of how you go from a product, building a product backlog, and then bringing it into a sprint. So there are other parts of Scrum, which we're not going to go through, today. So there are things like sprint review, which is almost like a show and tell. There's measuring progression. There's skills around prioritizing, measuring value. So something that's often quite difficult is when you're trying to work out what you can bring into a sprint, how long it will take. It can take a couple of sprints, probably about 3 or 4, to actually start to know what you can commit to within that sprint. And there are some really good games and tools about valuing work and working out sort of how long things will take. So we won't go through all of those today, but I would like to share with you a couple of bits on a couple of the ceremonies or artifacts. So you've probably heard me talk about the daily stand-up. It's also called a daily scrum. And this is something where it's a very disciplined ceremony where it's literally 10 minutes. So you don't talk about things, you literally just update the team on where you are and highlight if there are any obstacles. So somebody might say something like, I've found out the costing for Adobe and DocuSign, and I'm going to spend the day looking through the contracts before we can decide which one we're going to go with. And that's it. So you don't say, oh, it was a bit of a nightmare, and they never got back to me and it was really frustrating. You don't go through all that. You just literally update the team on what's happening. And you can use something called Kanban, which is basically backlog, in progress, and done. And it means that the project leader can move things around depending on where people are at. And it's a way of being able to track that progression and, if needed, offer support or guidance if needed. So in terms of what that looks like in real life, this is a real one. I have taken out proper names and what have you. So I use Trello. I'm a fan of Trello. I think it's a great tool for people that aren't used to other harder project management tools, and I have things like ongoing regular tasks, and they repeat. I set that up to be automated, things that are in progress, and then if anybody's stuck, then they let me know as their project leader, and I can come out and say, hey, why are you stuck? Let's talk about it. And I see that as my sort of servant leader role. I'm there to unstick them, to allow them to progress. And then we have different backlogs. So we have our own backlogs. And within each of these cards, if you're looking for more information, then, that's a bit blurry actually there, but you can have like little mini to-do lists in each of those. And you can move those cards around depending on where you are. And it's a great way, it's a great transparent way of seeing what's happening. So when your stakeholders, like the CEO, is saying, what's HR up to? You're able to give them that without having to do a report and what have you all the time. So another great one is retrospectives. So this is one of the things that I really enjoy, but you do have to have high psychological safety. So I always try and do some workshops and masterclasses around that. And again, it takes a while to have people be familiar with it and comfortable with it, should I say. And so a retrospective, there's loads of really fun retrospectives out there. I've just picked a simple one. I've used Avenger ones. I've used Ted Lasso themed ones. Also Friends. That was a really good one. So you can, it's all the same theme. It's about, what's helped us get to where we need to be, what's made us feel good. Let's celebrate some of those successes. What's held us back. And what can we see in the future that we need to work on? And it's a great way of working out where there are skills gaps within the team. It's a great way of working out whether there are behavioural concerns that perhaps need to be addressed. Obviously not during the retrospective, but as a leader, that might be something that you might need to address. But ultimately, it's about celebrating, what's just happened. We've pulled something out of the bag. Let's take a bit of time to have a think about what went really well, and then even better if we can move on to the next sprint cycle. So what have we learned today? I feel like I've talked quite a lot. I've learned that I really need to bring water when I'm doing these sessions. But hopefully what you have learned is a little bit about the Agile Manifesto, a little bit about the Scrum framework in some layman's terms, I'm hoping, a little bit about sprinting, and some more about frameworks that can support self-organising teams. And you've also learned about artifacts and ceremonies like daily stand-ups, retrospectives, and the like. So we have come to the end of the session. So just before I hand over to Joe, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming, for listening, and for being interested and for taking part. Well done to those that were brave enough. So as a thank you, I have got an Agile and Scrum tip sheet, and I am running free consultations. So if you want to link in with me, I will make sure that Joe has got those links. And if you want to give feedback, I'm going to pop them in the chat as soon as Joe starts. And if you want to give me some feedback, I would love that. I want to improve as well. So if there's anything I can do that would be better in this session, then please do give me that feedback. You can hold your phone up to the QR code, and I'm going to put all of those links in the chat as I hand over to Joe. How's about that? Bang on, 10 minutes left. That was my promise.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much, Kate. I found that absolutely intriguing and really interesting. So I'm sure that all the listeners did. So just like to say thank you. I will send out some correspondence this afternoon to the people who have signed up for the event, and I'll put a post on LinkedIn about if you want to how to access a copy of the material that Kate shared with you, and also the recording. So if you want to put a comment on the LinkedIn post, then I can send that information through to you. Kate's also running another event in April, on the 20th of April, called Psychological Safety. I'll put a note in that on the email. So if anybody wants to sign up for another one of Kate's sessions, then that's great. Next week, we've got two events, one on Tuesday called Get Closer to Your Perfect Week, and the other one on Thursday called How Do You Show Up? Why Emotional Intelligence Matters. So will be a link on the email to sign up for those. And finally, if anyone is recruiting, then we've also got accountancy recruit and FD recruit within the group. But otherwise, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Kate for her time and effort in putting the boardroom together, and also for everybody who's turned up today to listen. I hope you found it as interesting as I have. Thanks very much.